Good afternoon and welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. And firstly, let me wish you personal security, safety, good health for you and your family and your loved ones. Let me start with macro thoughts. I remain of the view, as I've been since August last year and before, that the most important currency to watch right now is the Chinese renminbi. I do expect it to blow out at some point this year. The virus is not correlated to endogenous market dynamics, but is an exogenous uncertainty that remains unresolved until now. I see a lot of drama around vaccines and other things, but I don't see a vaccine solution for at least 18 months. Home thoughts, I thought this was absolutely beautiful. Italian girl hugs her grandparents for the first time in months. 5-year-old Cecilia has gone 2 months without seeing her grandparents. Normally, she would have seen them on a weekly basis. Sky News, please watch it, it's so beautiful. I like this, Pelo Blanco from Moon_Scorpio. When people at Singawahani village, Bihar, saw Everest from their own houses, they say this happened after decades, courtesy Active Streetu via Parvin Kaswan. Quite beautiful as well. I went back to a speech that Boris Johnson delivered at Unga, which I actually found very interesting, and I'll give you one sentence from that speech, which was delivered in very late at night, very few people in the audience. He spoke of smart cities which pullulate with sensors, all joined together by the Internet of Things, bollards communing invisibly with lampposts, and asked, "How do you plead with an algorithm?" And increasingly, that looks like the way that some folks would like us to live. In Sydney, the magic hour means noise. It's heavenly to hear, New York Times. At night, the crickets make my street sound like the wilderness. In the morning, I hear the birds chirping at top volume from sun up until deep into what used to be rush hour. And in fact, here, it's like the Parliament of Fowls, which was a Chaucerian book that I studied at O-level. But it's beautiful. I like to wake up at 5:30 and just lie in bed and listen. In late afternoon, the sounds of nature in a city where millions of people are working from home or not working at all give way to something else, a burst of welcome human noise. 3, 2, 1, go, I heard a young neighbor yell the other day. Goading a sibling to speed over a tree limb they dragged into the street, leading to a crunch of bike tires on branches, followed by shouts of "Whoa!" And let's be clear, it is heavenly. Actual voices, kids, couples, arguments, what I hear outside my home office window or passing by when I run is the elevator music I never used to notice and now eagerly anticipate for connection and to mark the passage of time. The magic hour is by no means unique to Sydney. It can't be a coincidence that the cheers for health workers in New York, the block parties in San Francisco, and the mass singing in Italy all tend to occur just before dusk. As sociologists are quick to note, many of us feel compelled to end our days of pandemic loneliness with some kind of connection, preferably outdoors. I went back to the name that Elon Musk and his partner had given to their child, and I found the best explanation from Grimes SZ. X, the unknown variable, AE, my 11 spelling of AI, love and or artificial intelligence, A12, precursor to SR-17, our favorite aircraft, no weapons, no defenses, just speed, great in battle but non-violent, A equals Archangel, my favorite song. There you have it. And then I took myself back to that article I wrote about the way we live now, how it's a new 21st century that we find ourselves in, a luminous and fairy tale feel to life in quarantine, at least for me. And as you know, most fairy tales have an oftentimes dark and dangerous and unspoken undercurrent. And I rely on my 2 golden retrievers to bark if they even sense anything moving on the property, because everybody has left around us. I sit in my study and it's as if my hearing is sharpened. I hear the breeze, the birdsong, nature in its many forms, and the urban background noise, which was once the constant accompaniment to daily life, has entirely retreated, at least here, not in Sydney. The nights are dark and the stars are bright and the neighbours long gone. You felt the land taking you back to what was there 100 years ago, to what had been there always. I quoted Don DeLillo, everything is barely weeks, everything is days, we have minutes to live. And then I discovered that President Trump visited a mask factory, and the music that was playing in the background, as you can see from this short clip, was Live and Let Die. Took me back to Jenna Friedman, a reality TV star, botched the response to a global pandemic, and now we're all imprisoned in our homes and forced to watch him daily. Professor Neil Ferguson created the bang heard around the world, tweeted David B. Collum. And indeed he did. He broke his own quarantine rules for love, it seems. And there is therefore something karmic in this COVID-19. Here you see the world's clearest picture of the moon's craters, and is captured by a Californian astrophotographer. Pretty remarkable as well. And here, from May the 1st, 1920, a maypole dance at Fort Lewis College, Colorado, 100 years ago, from Patrick Chauvenet. Let's move on to political reflections. Global cases are still trending up. Afghanistan and Honduras are more than 10%. More than 5%, Russia, Brazil, Peru, India, Pakistan, Chile, Qatar, Bangladesh, Colombia, Egypt, Kuwait, Bahrain, Nigeria, Guinea, Bolivia, Somalia, and Sudan. And what you see there is the spillover from the developed markets into the developing markets and the frontier markets. And this is a great concern now, because you're seeing exponential and non-linear breakouts from Manaus to Kano in Nigeria, to Russia, to India, and parts of Africa. And therefore, as I said in February, the viral moment has arrived. Now, on the 1st of March, I wrote an article about the origins of COVID-19, and I quoted Thomas Pynchon, if they can get you asking the wrong questions, they don't have to worry about the answers. And I came across a long radio interview on True Pundit. FBI investigation targeted Dr. Fauci, but Comey pulled the plug. Top US scientist and research pioneer Dr. Judy Mikovits said she cooperated with the FBI during an investigation of Dr. Anthony Fauci and the National Institute of Health, alleging Fauci was a workplace tyrant, not relevant for this, who was under investigation for swiping scientific research, covering up tainted vaccines, doling out lucrative federal grants to feckless cronies, and much more. Fauci's parent agency, the National Institute of Health, is not the only governmental agency involved in what amounts here to decades of corruption gone awry. It's a long radio interview, but if you've got the time, it's just mind-boggling. And therefore, when Fauci says there's no scientific evidence the coronavirus was made in a Chinese lab, he's got zero credibility. He's become the scientific face of America's COVID-19 response, and he says the best evidence shows the virus behind the pandemic was not made in a lab in China. He's calling it a circular argument. Also doesn't entertain an alternate theory that someone found the coronavirus in the wild, brought it to a lab, and then it accidentally escaped. That's not correct. They've engineered it. And he knows about it because he gave them a grant to do exactly that. And that's why the SARS-CoV-2 is closely related to SARS-CoV. The two viruses share 79% sequence identity. But interestingly, the SARS-CoV-2 S protein has a 10 to 20-fold higher affinity for ACE2 than S protein SARS-CoV. And that precisely is where it's been engineered, to make it more virulent and pathogenic. And that's why I said in early March, a paranoid is someone who knows a little of what's going on. Viruses, as we know, exhibit nonlinear and exponential characteristics. And essentially that's what we're seeing happen now in the rest of the world. Reuters, via Rover 829, China's Hong Kong Affairs Office says violent Hong Kong protesters are a political virus and Hong Kong will never be calm if they're not removed. In October last year, on the occasion of China's Communist Party turning 70, I said in an article which is worth reading, I'm sure Xi sees Hong Kong and Taiwan like a virus. That was before I knew of the virus. And he is looking to impose a quarantine just like he has imposed on Xinjiang. Currency markets, we're seeing a bit of dollar strength. This is an interesting analysis by V. Patel FX. Dollar smile in reality. 2020 global recession resembles 2009 and puts us in the dollar haven regime. 2021 is set to see rest of the world growth outperform the US, meaning the broad dollar index should weaken. 2021 US GDP expectations have to be revised markedly higher for this narrative to change. As I said previously, which is the point that V. Patel FX is making, is a V-shaped recovery is a fantasy. And interestingly, the investor Sam Zell on Bloomberg TV says too many people are anticipating a V-like recovery. Commodity markets, S&P, Goldman Sachs TR commodity index compared to the S&P 500, it makes the commodity index look incredibly undervalued. Nobody wants to buy them. This is from a chart going back to 1970, Trading for Pro. And that takes me back to Tavi Costa. Curiosamente, ese periodo marcó una das peores décadas para ese mercado na historia. Interestingly, this period marked one of the worst decades for commodities in history. The contradiction between these numbers, presumably more accurate, and the numbers created by the Chinese Communist government is undeniable, and I have to agree with him. WTI has had a stunning rebound, and now where are we? US crude oil, $25.42. And remember, it was negative not too long ago. And this is on the basis that the oil producers are going to manage to bring down supply. Let's see. Gold, 1,706.50. We've been churning around here for a while, but we will lift off of that, I am very certain. South African mine shuts down after coronavirus cases found. The issue of social distancing in a mining environment is not going to be practically applicable, says the National Union of Mine Workers. And this is something that I don't think we factored in. But I had factored in when I said the viral moment has arrived, and I said at this point I would venture gold is correlated to the coronavirus, which is set to turn parabolic and is already non-linear and exponential, because I'd expected more of that type of thing, of shutdowns. 22nd of March, I reiterated my gold call, and I said gold will soon turn viral to the upside, and I'm looking for more than $2,000. Emerging markets, the BRICS lead the world except China with one case, Ghana more than 10%. This was prior to the other tweet I was mentioning from Mr. Streeter. Ghana more than 5%, Russia, Brazil, India, Ecuador, Saudi Arabia, Mexico, Bangladesh, South Africa, Kuwait, Bahrain, Afghanistan, Nigeria, Guinea and Bolivia, Senegal. And that's why I said what is clear now is that the Malcolm Gladwell moment has definitively arrived. What is happening in India? Biggest jump in coronavirus cases with 200 deaths in the past 24 hours. That's from Basu Ashish. And you can do a rule of thumb calculation from the mortality rate to know the number of cases. India's service PMI collapsed to 5.4 in April, down from 49.3, that's JS Blockland. At least that's an honest and accurate number. The direct and indirect economic impact of the tourism industry in India is estimated at 10% of GDP. And, as I said, tourism is stopped out in 2020, and I think will be stopped out for most of 2021. Sub-Saharan Africa, if Zimbabwe has indeed deployed troops to Mozambique, Mnangagwa is required to inform Parliament promptly and give reasons for their deployment. We touched on this insurgency in the north of Mozambique, where a lot of the gas has been found yesterday. And they've proven an extremely formidable opponent. The Russians had to take off. So I don't know how the Zimbabwean army is going to do, given that they've probably been starved of resources for many years. A lost little Africa, how China too blames foreigners for the virus, New York books. Fantastic article by A.P. Arzu. In this pandemic, we have quickly become acquainted with a new form of witnessing, one that is both more collective and more remote than ever. From our various isolated indoors, blue LED screens have formed small portals into violence, beauty, tragedy, and nonsense. More than ever, we exist in the discourse. I thought that was very good. The outbreak of COVID-19, the disease caused by the novel coronavirus SARS-CoV-2, began in Wuhan, the capital of Hubei province, which ultimately suffered the highest toll in China, as at the end of April, more than 84,000 confirmed cases and 3,200 deaths by a wide margin. By April 11, the authorities in Guangzhou had identified 119 imported cases of COVID-19, 12 of which concerned nationals of African countries. A cluster of local non-imported infections in the city was traced to a single African restaurant. Taken together, the experience of Africans and the haunting chorus of racism suggest that this was about more than simply pandemic management. We've spoken about this previously. At the same time, Chinese diplomats advised their African counterparts not to let certain media outlets exaggerate the situation and drive a wedge between China and Africa. It was a rare moment in China, as journalist Tony Lin noted, when nationalism lost to racism. Censorship regimes with as much experience and sophistication as China understand the physics of discourse. They know how nationalism, like a flywheel, once set in motion, can generate great force and be difficult to stop. An information ecosystem curated by censors is inherently imbalanced. It is the distorted remnant after some things have been actively removed and others passively left intact. She's then talking about Hefei province, which came forward with a proposal to rebuild the Nangang Mosque, a centerpiece of Hu culture and history, first established in the 1780s. The new mosque was to be erected near a recently built flashy condominium complex. However, opposition to the project from neighboring majority Han people unleashed an online torrent of anti-Muslim hate speech, culminating in threats to desecrate the proposed site with a pig's head and pig's blood. This is how China's censored discourse flywheel works. This nationalism, of which the particularly virulent online anti-black racism we've recently seen is a strain, though highly motivating and thus politically useful, once it gains momentum, it is difficult to moderate. The racism we see directed towards black people, immigrants and Muslims, as well as the misogyny that have their source in far-right Western groups, is replicated in the rhetoric of China's digital nationalists. She herself is part of the Chinese diaspora. This is the author in East Africa, a mirror image of the Africans in Guangzhou. Knowing how little I understood about the city I was watching from afar, I embarked on a process to understand Little Africa, as Guangzhou is sometimes known, not Guangzhou writ large, but specifically the city's relationship with its African diaspora, which is the largest in China. I learned that we must begin to speak of Little Africa in the past tense. The official number of Africans in Guangzhou, though arguably a vast underestimate since it doesn't take undocumented migrants into account, has plummeted from 16,000 in 2014 to 4,500 this year. The neon pink fluorescents and backlit red awnings harmonize with what I would imagine to be warm, humid air of tropical Guangdong. Fruit stands, clothes racks, suitcases spill into the walkway, and as Castillo walks, mostly wordlessly, the people passing by form a stunning carousel of humanity. A Muslim Chinese woman in a pink silk sequined hijab, an African man in a long sand-toned kaftan, two professional black men in loose silk shirts right behind them, a young black man wearing a glitzy cap, a bearded white man clutching his backpack, a Uyghur man brushing sauce or oil on a row of charred tilapia, while an African man waits for his fish. Castillo stops to point out that tilapia grilled whole like this is an African preference. Many Uyghurs started serving fish and chicken African style in the past few years. It was not driven by any extraneous force or overarching mission, but rather by the complicated, imperfect, almost molecular human forces of profit-seeking, love, pride, boredom, curiosity, self-actualization, and escape. China is not a country of immigrants compared to North America and Europe, where international migrants often make up 10 to 30% of a country's total population. The figure in China remains at only a tenth of a percentage point, lower even than North Korea's. There are comparatively fewer pathways for work permits, permanent residence, and naturalization than in any other countries. Only 7,356 permanent residence cards were issued between 2004 and 2014. Some more vulnerable foreigners, especially those from the global south who often set out on their own with little formal support or safety nets, found themselves with no choice but to overstay their visas and slip into an undocumented life. In 100 years' time, I don't want China to have become like the US with all kinds of people mixed together, wrote a Weibo user cited by the online magazine Sixth Tone in a post that received over 22,000 likes. We Chinese people have a strong national sentiment. We have the same ancestors. We're all children of the Yellow Emperor. The same blood courses through our veins. Amartya Sen wrote in his 2006 book, Identity and Violence, that the counter to identity-based conflict is not we are all the same, but rather we are diversely different. China is projecting broad messages of cooperation, especially in service of the Belt and Road Initiative, which I think is now dead as a dodo, or will be reinvented. But these paradoxical forces, one outward facing and positive, the other inward facing and negative, will surely work against each other. The binary also contains its own asymmetry. Why does immigration only get to flow in one direction? How is it that the Chinese diaspora flourishes openly in Africa, according to one study, and there are more than 40,000 Chinese nationals in Kenya alone, but in China, Africans are met with violent dehumanization. Here you see a trader among what was then China's largest population of African residents on his way to work at a market for used auto parts, Guangzhou, Guangdong province. I touched on most of these points in my article, The End of Vanity, China, Africa, Win-Win. I called it the defining engagement of the last 2 decades for sub-Saharan Africa. I said the entire China-Africa relationship has been an extraordinary exercise in narrative framing and linguistic control, and this whole episode in Guangzhou broke through that narrative framing, accompanied by a chorus of party hacks chirruping hosannas at every turn, amplifying largely meaningless feel-good phrases artfully placed in the mouths of our politicians and our newspapers. It is remarkable. And then I was describing the engagement. I was quoting Tavi Costa, and then I was saying that we've arrived at the Hambantota moment. I said China triggered the African recovery some 2 decades ago. However, since then, a freewheeling China has favorited elites, has facilitated large-scale looting via inflated infrastructure, some of which were white elephants, and has lumped the African citizen with the tab. And I said how this plays out is now the key to Sino-African relations going forward. That was in 2018, and we've now arrived at the moment I was describing, which is the Hambantota moment. And I said basically China has an option in sub-Saharan Africa to buy all these assets at fire sale prices. But I was then talking about exactly what this article in the New York Books was talking about, which is a rebellion at ground level. Here you see a black woman is flatly refused entry to a shopping centre while her white friend is told she can pass. That was from Dave Greenwich, 57. This cannot go on. African Union must act now. That's from Nepetin. And there are literally hundreds of stories like this on social media. And I said privileged pro-China African elites who are trying to defend the Chinese position are seeing that their bona fides are being shredded in real time. The entire win-win narrative paraphernalia is being shredded as we speak. Okay, let's move on. Cumulative COVID-19 cases since the first 100 cases were reported. This is a selection of African countries from Worldometers. As I said on the 2nd of March, we know that the coronavirus is exponential, nonlinear, and multiplicative. And quoting epsilon theory, real-world exponential growth looks like nothing, 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 then cluster, 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 then boom. And now Bloomberg is reporting mystery deaths thrust Kano into epicenter of Nigeria virus fight. Rising cases of unexplained deaths have put Nigeria's second biggest city of Kano at the epicenter of the coronavirus outbreak in Africa's most populous country. Local news reports citing cemetery workers that emerged last month revealed a spike in mysterious deaths in the city with an estimated 8 million residents. Kano State Governor Abdullahi Ganduje initially blamed ailments such as diabetes and malaria. Our careful observation and understanding indicated that coronavirus is the cause of the mass deaths. Nasiru Gwarzo, the head of the Presidential Task Force, told reporters on Sunday in the city. While fewer than 50,000 of the approximately 3.5 million confirmed cases of coronavirus worldwide are in Africa, the speed with which the situation unraveled in Kano has heightened concern the virus has spread undetected in other crowded cities on the continent. That's the point. This disease has spread among almost every strata of our society, Abu Bakr said. Lagos remains the hardest hit of Nigeria, recording 1,100 confirmed cases as of Monday, but a third of the nation's total and 3 times as many as in Kano. After Kano recorded its first case on April 11, testing was slow to gain traction, with the lone laboratory testing for the virus closed for 5 days after one of the workers was infected. If Kano had the capacity of testing of Lagos, Kano would probably surpass Lagos. Even as Abuja and Lagos went into lockdown on March 30, many people were still able to travel to Kano City, with the state government evidently unprepared to deal with a COVID-19 outbreak. Now the coronavirus has been detected among the city's street kids known as al-Majiris, who attend Islamic schools and often beg for a living. The Kano authorities have responded by sending many of these children back to their home states, a move that has raised fears the infections may be spreading further. You can bet on that. Part of the contributing factors in Kano is that people don't really believe that COVID-19 exists. Somalia tested more than 1,400 people, 835 of them tested positive. That is almost 60%. Harun Maruf is saying it's high, but doctors say the number doesn't reflect spread of disease among wider society because those tested were specifically selected. Therefore, the viral moment has indeed arrived. There is something karmic in this COVID-19. It's invisible, but it has already defeated the most expensive aircraft carriers, lurks everywhere and in silence. And in a straight contest between coronavirus and bullshit, the coronavirus wins every time. Madagascar finds keen takers for its tonic, touted as a virus drug, building a factory to mass produce a drink that's touted by authorities and some African leaders as a cure for COVID-19, even though it hasn't been clinically tested or approved by drug regulators. Sold as COVID Organics, the drink contains extracts of the Artemisia annua plant, which is used to treat malaria. South African All Shares down 13.84% year to date. The rand is around 1840. 95% of the population in Egypt lives along the Nile River. That's why the dam in Ethiopia is such a flashpoint. Egyptian pound 15.75, EGX 30 minus 27.03% year to date. Nigeria All Share minus 11.3% year to date. Ghana Stock Exchange minus 7.68% year to date. I quoted Taleb in my article in early February. Connectivity increases fat-tailedness, he said. And the article was Viruses Exhibit Non-Linear and Exponential Characteristics. We've discovered that 37 truck drivers of 97 total cases, 17 Kenyans, 14 Tanzanians, have been reported with coronavirus at the Uganda border. Early March, I wrote, Debt, Virus and Locusts Create a Perfect Storm for Africa. And we now know that the viruses are in northern Kenya and on what a scale. IMF board most likely to approve Kenya's $750 million facility tomorrow, which is today. That, together with $1 billion from the World Bank, should beef up reserves. Mohamed Wellier. Reserves have been dependent on foreign debt flows last few years, not a good way to build them. In this case, debt immediately goes up by 180 billion. Words alone don't cut it when you're talking trillions of locusts, is an incredible Washington Post report with lots of video via Max Beriak and Lusta Photo. Have a watch of it. Click on the link, it's on Rich Wrap-Ups. As I said, on the 2nd of March, on top of all this, we have a locust invasion. This is a locust swarm in Lodwar, Kakuma Road, northern Kenya, photo by Musin Bile. Kenya reported a record 45 new coronavirus cases, 4.18% of 1,077 samples tested positive. Total cases have surged 50% in 9 days and are accelerating, but we're not testing that many. Digital purchases to be taxed at 1.5% in Kenya. That's David Herbling in Bloomberg. Plans a 1.5% digital tax on the value of online transactions according to proposals in the Finance Bill 2020. cashing in on a nascent industry taking off amid the coronavirus pandemic. Government in East Africa's biggest economy will also start levying a minimum gross sales tax of 1%, and the minimum tax will require even loss-making firms to remit tax based on their sales. The Kenya shilling has strengthened to 106.30 on the news that flour dumping had been reduced. Nairobi All Share is minus 12.45% year to date. NSE20 is minus 23.84% year to date. Thank you for listening.